Chapter 5. Anne. Despite the air conditioning unit puttering away under the window, Peter's hospital room was muggy from the changing weather outside. Anne had held Peter's hand in silence for hours while she stared at his closed eyelids. "I really need you to be okay. I need you to be strong." Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Paul, Tane, and Shiloh walking into the room. They stood back to watch their brother lying in his hospital bed. "It's fine, boys. Come on in," Thomas said. "He's going to be okay. He's just sedated." "Can he hear us?" Shiloh asked as he shifted awkwardly from one foot to the other. "I don't know," Thomas said. Turning to Anne, he said, "I asked the boys to come up to visit now because you need to take a break. We both do. You've been up all night. We should go home to rest." Anne arched her eyebrows. "I don't want to leave before Peter wakes up. I'm going to stay the night again. I sort of thought you would say that, so I had Shiloh pack you a bag. You might as well take a shower here since we're paying for the room." As Thomas spoke, Shiloh slid a backpack off his shoulder and placed it next to his mom. "I brought you some clean clothes." "You need them." Shiloh wrinkled his nose to tease Anne, who almost smiled. Shiloh was Anne's second biggest mama's boy, after Peter. She swore, after raising Peter, she was done having kids. But now, looking at her son, Shiloh, she couldn't imagine what she would do without him. Shiloh was short for his age and the quietest of all the Arnold boys. Thomas referred to Shiloh as an easy keeper, a term they used on Thomas's childhood ranch to label a horse that was low maintenance. Shiloh had dark hair like Tane and Paul. Currently, he was going through the stage where he refused haircuts. The longer his hair grew out, the wavier it got, and it looked like a surfer haircut. Anne grabbed Shiloh's bag, and then with her free hand, she reached for his extended hand and squeezed. "Thank you, bud. I don't want to go home, but a shower does sound awesome." Anne stood up and went to the adjacent bathroom. "I have the best children, but right now I am so proud of Shiloh." Anne remembered how crazy life was when he was added to her family. It was nearly a dozen years ago, and Anne was weeks out from her due date with Shiloh. She was not ready for another addition yet. Peter's kindergarten adjustment issues had consumed all her time, and she had little energy to even dig out the old baby clothes and crib. She needed to replenish consumable supplies like diapers, wipes, and diaper cream. Her need to shop worked out well because Thomas had taken the day off to give her a break and to attend parent-teacher conferences. She shopped at her favorite boutiques until she realized she had only about 30 minutes to get to the school. She felt uneasy about the meeting, but she knew Thomas would be able to handle any uncomfortable conversation. Marie was going to babysit her brothers, and Anne planned to meet Thomas at the school to save on commuting time. Although it was a trying time for her, pregnancy was always sweet because she was the only one who got to know the baby in such an intimate way. It wasn't going to be long before everyone else would know the baby too. Anne rubbed her belly. "Almost time for everyone to meet you." She made her final purchases, loaded them into the van, and drove to the school. Anne and Thomas had been invited to come a half hour before regular conferences for a meeting with Peter's teachers along with the principal. They were not sure how many parents got this special privilege, but it was discouraging. They sat at a long table in the principal's office with the gym teacher, music teacher, and his classroom teacher. Anne was jittery, as she didn't know what to expect. Thomas looked cool and was even making jokes about having to be in the principal's office. "Well, let's dive right into our agenda for tonight. We don't have a lot of time as we have a packed schedule," Mrs. Krieg said after introductions. "We all know of the previous discussions and accommodations we've made for Peter. We know he has had trouble adjusting and transitioning, and as experienced educators, we're concerned. We recommend Peter be evaluated for some medical support. Yes, we know you're a physician." She nodded at Thomas. "But we have valid concerns. Where are you guys in this process?" Thomas leaned forward to retrieve a white ballpoint pen from the center of the conference table. "I see Peter every day, and if I felt there was something out there that could help him pharmaceutically, then I would be the first to recommend it. He's highly sensitive. It makes him see the world in a little distorted way. His senses are always in overdrive. He gets overwhelmed easier. It makes things hard for him, but it's not a disease." Thomas bounced the end of the pen on the table as he held it with his thumb and index finger. Anne watched the pen bounce up and down, refusing to make eye contact with Mrs. Krieg. Mrs. Krieg was not easily convinced. "We have a school psychiatrist who is waiting to see Peter. I know you're in the clinic working with families, but this isn't your specialty. We're just asking for an evaluation, and we need a parent's signed permission slip." "I appreciate your interest in Peter, but we'll handle the medical issues at home," Thomas said. He turned to the gym teacher, Mr. Logan. "How's Peter hitting those curveballs?" Mr. Logan spoke. "No curveballs yet." He laughed and continued. "Peter's busy, but he likes to work through things and get them right. He does get upset if things aren't his way. He has a hard time with transitions." Mr. Logan paused and looked towards Mrs. Krieg. Anne watched Mr. Logan stare at Mrs. Krieg, and she felt like he was being coached on what to say. "He loves your class," Thomas said as he looked at Mrs. Polly. Mrs. Polly's eyes darted toward Mrs. Krieg, and then back to Thomas. "I adore Peter. He sings the loudest. He's the busiest. He's ecstatic about his solo next week. I was working with him today, and he's catching on quickly." She paused and then smiled. "He does like to tease, though. He played the piano while we were singing, and he insisted he never took lessons." Mrs. Polly shook her head and shrugged with a half-smile. "He's a storyteller." "He doesn't take lessons," Anne said. "Oh, he got lessons from somewhere because he plays perfect." "No, I've never left him anywhere with a piano. He never went to preschool or anywhere until he started school here. He's never had lessons," Anne defended. "I don't know, Anne. You should ask him to play. He tells me he's never had lessons, but he can play. You don't just sit down at the piano and play like that." "Well, we're not here to talk about piano lessons," Mrs. Krieg interrupted. "We also need to address Peter's absences. He has already missed the maximum amount of time allowed to pass for the year. In normal situations, we would hold him back. But there's a caveat in kindergarten. Right now, he's only doing the half day in the afternoon. As you know, we added full days of kindergarten last year. In the morning, we do enrichment. It's up to the parents to decide if they want to enroll their kids in full days. But for Peter, I would suggest you start bringing him in for the whole day. We could use it to make up some time." "He can barely make it through a half day. How is he going to make it through a full day?" Anne asked. "Maybe he'll do better in the mornings. His brain will be fresh and rested. I don't know what else to do, short of holding him back. But we're only halfway through the year." Anne looked to Thomas, who nodded back at her. "We can try it," she said. "Great. I can let Val know to email you the papers to enroll in our enrichment program. We can start first thing Monday. Just drop him off with the rest of the kids." She pushed a paper at Anne. "Here's the form I need signed and returned for the medical evaluation. Please take it home to review it. And I'm afraid this is all the time we have for this meeting, especially since we are unable to form a unified consensus about the evaluation," Mrs. Krieg said. She got up from her chair, walked to the door, and stood next to it, waiting to escort everyone out. Anne wanted to finish her conversation with Mrs. Polly, but this wasn't a good time. She would talk to Peter when she got home. How silly Mrs. Polly was, insisting Peter could play piano. They drove home in the separate cars they arrived in, but once home, Anne hopped into the passenger side of Thomas's truck. Thomas reached for her hand and helped her up into the seat. "What are you thinking?" he asked as he pulled her under his arm in a side snuggle. "Are you angry?" "No, I knew it was coming. I think something has changed with Mrs. Krieg, though, because she used to be so supportive. Just a few weeks ago, she was playing dinosaurs on the floor with Peter. Tonight, she was practically growling." It did sound like she was growling, didn't it? Maybe that's her dinosaur growl. Thomas tried to imitate it as best he could. They both laughed. Anne sighed. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to go inside and make dinner. We can be thankful for this problem because it could be worse. But I'm going to forget about that meeting." Thomas took Mrs. Krieg's form that Anne was holding and wadded it up into a ball. "I agree," Anne said as she turned to get out of the vehicle. Thomas climbed out of his truck, and something caught his eye. The living room light was on. The curtain was open, and you could see right into the room. Thomas wasn't looking into the room, though. He was stuck on the window. One of the panels in the bay window was broken. He flew up the walkway, and sure enough, as he walked, his feet crunched shattered glass all over the ground. Anne was right behind him as she saw it too. "What the?" Thomas said. He flung the front door wide open and yelled, "Kids, get out here! Where's my window?" Marie came out from the kitchen with Peter under her arm. Her hair was ratted in the back like she had been wrestling, and her eyes were as wide as pancakes. "Thank goodness you're home! I'm not ever babysitting again." "We're painting with thumbs, Mom," Peter said as he held up his blue and green thumbs. Thomas yelled again, "Boys, get out here! Marie, where are your brothers?" Marie looked down. "They left after they smashed the window." "Huh? They did this?" Thomas asked. "Paul and Tane did this?" "Yeah, they were wrestling and fell on the floor lamp, and it just punched the window right out. I told them you would kill them when you got home. They didn't want to get into trouble, so they ran away." "What do you mean, they ran away? Are they out back?" Thomas walked to the back door in 5 giant steps, threw it open, and called for the boys. But he heard no reply. "Where are they?" he asked Marie again as he walked back through the front of the house. "I told you, they left. They ran away," Marie replied. "Where did they go?" Thomas asked, but his voice was booming so loud it discouraged Marie from answering him. "Oh, great! Where do you think they went? It's getting so cold and dark out," Anne said as she looked out the window. "I don't know. They're jerks, and they were picking on Peter. He was getting upset, so I told them to find something to do. They wrestled each other, broke the window, and then they left. We're glad they're gone. Much quieter," Marie said. Peter giggled, holding his thumbs up again. "You shouldn't have let them leave by themselves. Something could happen. How long have they been gone?" Anne asked. "An hour, maybe?" Marie nervously pulled her lip with fingers. Annoyed, Thomas said, "Marie, you watch Peter. Don't leave the house. You call me if you see them. Hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Anne, you go ask the neighbors." He paused as he saw her pregnant silhouette. He couldn't have her running around at night. "Wait, you take the van and check the park. I'll go on foot and check with the neighbors. They're probably around the block somewhere." Anne was already out the door, calling people. As she pulled the van up next to the sidewalk that surrounded the park, she could see it was obviously vacant. Her nerves made her shaky and her back was aching. This is not how I wanted my night to end. She drove on. The neighborhood seemed quiet. Anne texted Thomas. "Any luck?" "Not at the park. Headed to school now." Thomas texted back. "No luck with neighbors. I'll meet you at school." Thomas met Anne outside the school, and they scavenged the playground. The sky was dark, and the time was approaching 7 p.m. They tried the front doors to the school, and Thomas looked at Anne in surprise when they opened. But they both said out loud at the same time, "Conferences!" The hall was dotted with a few conference stragglers. Thomas motioned to the janitor, who was busy vacuuming the front entryway. "Hey, Arnie, have you seen Paul or Tane tonight?" "No, but I've been waxing the floor in the gym. You can check with Val." "Thanks." Anne and Thomas both chimed at the same time. They raced to the front office. "Val, have you seen Paul or Tane?" Anne blurted out when she saw Valerie. Valerie looked up, adjusted her round wire glasses up higher onto her nose, and said, "I don't think so. It's been mostly parents tonight without kids. Didn't you guys just leave here?" Thomas spoke. "Yeah, but the boys are missing. We left them with Marie, and they told her they were running away." "Well, let me make an announcement to see if they are here or if anyone has seen them." She slid her chair over to the intercom microphone and paged the boys. After waiting a while with nobody buzzing back, Thomas said, "We better get going, Anne." Anne looked at Val. "Do you have any ideas where an 8- and a 9-year-old would run away to? They were on foot." "Have you tried the mall? Or maybe a movie?" "No, I didn't think they would go all the way up there, but we can check." "All the other doors are locked, and people have to leave out this door. I can watch for them," Valerie said. "Thank you." Anne's back hurt so badly she could barely stand still. They walked out together into the cool night air. Anne couldn't help but be reminded it was supposed to get down into the 30s. For a Minnesota December, 30 degrees was mild, but Anne didn't want to be out running around in it, and it wasn't safe for her boys to be out either. "Brr," Thomas muttered as he fumbled with the van key. "We really need to upgrade to one of those new vans with electronic remote locks." He looked at his wife. She was pasty white, standing by the passenger side of the van. "Tom," Anne said as she stared out into the sky. Her voice was so weak, it was almost iridescent, and it sent chills down Thomas's spine. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't move. She never called him Tom, either, which alarmed him as he rushed over to her side of the van where she stood clenching the van door with white knuckles. As Thomas turned the bend around the corner, he saw it. The water. Anne's feet were soaked and centered in a water puddle. "Your water broke." Anne cut him off as she regained composure and tried to climb into the van. "I'm fine. Contractions haven't started yet. Let's go look for the boys." "Anne, you need to go into the hospital. You shouldn't be on your feet until we know the baby's head's engaged." Anne didn't hear Thomas. "I can't go to the hospital until I know my boys are safe. Get in the van. Let's go to the mall. Contractions haven't started yet, and it could take hours." "I'm calling Dr. Larry to meet us at the hospital." Thomas slid into the driver's seat. "You can tell him it will be a while before I get there, because I am not going there with my boys out missing." Anne motioned for Thomas to start driving. "Let's get... Ah! Ah!" Anne screamed as she grabbed her back. "That's a contraction. You're in labor, Anne. It's time to go in now," Thomas said sternly as he reversed the van swiftly. "It was a spasm. I'm not in labor. Go to the mall," Anne screamed. Thomas was not listening as he was on the phone with her doctor. He stopped at the stop sign where he needed to turn left to go to the mall. Instead, he went straight in the direction of the hospital. Anne was furious. "I know my own body, and it's not time." She leaned over to the steering wheel, grabbed it, jerking it left. I said, let's go to the mall. Thomas gripped the wheel tight for control of the van. You're going to get us killed, Anne. Sit back. I can't go yet. I have to know my kid's safe. What if something happens? I have to find them first. Anne sobbed so hard that she lost her strength, and Thomas could push her hand back off the wheel, and she didn't even notice. Thomas, I can't have a baby if I'm missing 2 of my other babies, she wailed. We'll find them. They're not missing. We just don't know where they are yet. They have only been gone a few hours. Call your sister and tell her to meet you at the hospital. I'll find them. Anne called her sister. Thomas called Marie and got an update. No word from the boys. Thomas told Marie to get Peter dressed, grab Mom's hospital bag, and wait by the door. It was getting too late for them to stay by themselves. Marie would go to the hospital with Anne, and Peter would help him look for the boys. Is the baby coming? Marie squealed. It looks like it won't be long. Be ready. Oh, and put a note on the door if the boys come back to call us. Tell them it's urgent. He hated to leave the house empty with the boys gone, but he couldn't leave the other kids by themselves this late. He decided to call the neighbor, Janice, and ask her to watch for the boys, too. After that call, he looked at Anne, and she was quiet. She was gazing past the window, looking scared to death. Thomas drove the van faster. Thomas, I think we need to go look at the mall. They have that big arcade the boys love. I bet they're there. Anne, I'll look as soon as I drop you off. Well, if you're not going to take me, then I'll do it myself, Anne said as she opened the van door and half jumped, half fell out onto the sidewalk. She turned around, in the direction of the mall, and waddled her way toward it. You turkey! Thomas jerked the steering wheel, pulling it over so he could jump out after her. Pregnancy hormones, he muttered under his breath. Anne, this is dangerous. You know you can't walk that far in labor. Walking's good for labor. Yeah, if you want to have this baby on the sidewalk, but your water isn't intact. You know you're being foolish. She continued to waddle down the street. I can't have my babies missing. What can I do to get you to go to the hospital? You can get my babies. Oh, man. Anne grabbed her back. Her contractions were getting closer. Thomas reached for Anne's arms and held them tightly so she wouldn't escape. Let me go, Anne screamed and twisted, trying to escape his hold. No, he said as he squirmed to keep her still. You're crazy! Anne wiggled and pulled so hard, trying to escape, that she fell to the ground. Thomas came with her, still holding her arms locked with one arm. On the ground, Anne felt the cold earth beneath her, reminding her of the boys outside. They must be getting cold. Thomas broke her thoughts by saying, Let me handle this. You go to the hospital and worry about this baby. He placed his hand on her belly and continued, I'll find our boys. We're wasting time. Anne was scared to death. Tane and Paul had never tried anything like this before. She needed them found. Okay, I will go, but you promise you'll find them quickly. Let's go, Thomas said, holding his hand out to help Anne off the ground. They drove in silence to pick up Marie and Peter. Marie had no news from the boys, and she looked guilty. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know they would actually leave and be gone this long, Marie said. You should have called me right away, Marie, Anne said. Her contractions were getting closer together and harder. She didn't have words of comfort to offer Marie. She knew she had just a few hours before this baby needed to be born, and she hoped everything would be back to normal by then. She didn't want Thomas to miss the birth, but she wasn't going to let him come back without her Tane and Paul. Thomas helped Anne into a wheelchair outside the hospital where Anne's sister, Maggie, was waiting to receive her. Together, Maggie and Marie wheeled Anne through the hospital doors. Anne watched her husband drive away. Chapter 6. Thomas. After Thomas had dropped Anne and Marie off at the hospital, Thomas drove around in search without a plan. He tried to brainstorm by interviewing Peter again. What did the boys say before they left? They didn't want to get in trouble. They were going to live in the woods. Woods? Thomas drummed his fingers on the steering wheel as he drove. Minnesota has trees, but there really aren't woods anywhere in town. He checked the clock on the dash. It read almost 9 p.m., and the temperature was dropping rapidly. They've been gone over 3 hours. They've got to be getting hungry and cold. Maybe they stopped home? He asked Peter, but it was more to himself. He dialed Janice's number on his cell phone. Hey, Janice, would you do me a favor and go sit at the house so you can watch for the boys? He ran his hand through his dark hair and let his fingers linger on top of his head to knead his scalp, easing the tension. I suppose I can do that. You still don't have any word from them? She asked. No, I'm sort of confused as to where else to look. We've been everywhere within walking distance. Well, I'm sure it won't be long now. Usually this runaway game is fun until you get hungry. I'm hoping that's the case this time, too. Thomas checked the rearview mirror to see that Peter's eyelids were starting to droop. Call me if you see them, please. I better pay attention here. Will do. Bye, Janice said. Thank you. Bye. Thomas coasted around the neighborhood with his eyes peeled for clues. The winter sky was clouded, without light to illuminate his search. He checked some gas stations for the boys, but there was no sign of them. He drove faster now, and he started to check fast food restaurants and even hotel lobbies on the way to the mall. They must be somewhere inside because it's so cold out. Thomas pulled the van into an almost empty parking lot at the mall. Come on, Peter. Let's check one more place. Peter obliged and slid out of his seat. He held Thomas's hand as they darted into the mall entrance, straight into the piercing wind. It burns, Peter said. I know, Bud. Run! Thomas tucked his chin down into the collar of his jacket. I can't see, Peter said, as the wind irritated his eyes to the point of tears. Thomas reached down, pulled Peter up to carry him, and ran faster. Once inside, Thomas placed Peter on the ground. Ah, man, the burr willies are out tonight. Thomas rubbed his hands. I'm glad Anne doesn't know how cold it is now. Here, let's go this way to the janitor's office. Thomas led Peter through the entryway. They found the janitor driving a floor scrubber by the food court. He shut off the machine when he saw Thomas waving. Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I was hoping you could do me a favor, Thomas implored. I can try, he said. I'm looking for my 2 boys. Can you make an announcement over the intercom? Peter clung to Thomas's leg, wiggling so much it almost pulled Thomas off balance. He glared at Peter. Can't you stand still for 1 minute? I can do that. Just wait here. I'll call them to the food court. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Thomas said as the man left. Peter leaned into Thomas's leg hard. Thomas stepped back to balance himself. Knock it off, Peter! Thomas grabbed Peter's arm, pulling him into a standing position. Can you stand still? Peter folded his chin down and stood straight for 2 seconds. Then he traced the tile lines on the floor with 1 foot. How does Anne get anything done with Peter? I'm going to lose it. An announcement came over the intercom, and Thomas waited. Nothing. A few moments passed. The announcement repeated. And still, nothing. The janitor came back and shrugged. Thomas concluded the mall was a dead end and left. Back into the van, Thomas and Peter continued their search, driving back towards home again. I'm tired, Dad. I want to go home, Peter said. I know, Bud. We can't go home until we find your brothers. I want Mom. Mom's at the hospital. You can't go there. Thomas stopped at a red light and turned back to look at Peter. His eyes were rubbed red underneath. We have to look for your brothers. Peter grunted and rubbed his eyes again. The light turned green. Thomas could hear Peter quietly protesting as he drove, but eventually it got less, and then Peter was asleep. Thomas tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Who can I call? Where would they be? His phone beeped, notifying him of a text. It was Anne. I'm 7 centimeters. Where are you? Driving. I checked Mall. Nothing. You better find them and hurry. Thomas's head got even heavier as he threw the phone on the passenger seat. I'm trying. Thomas's phone rang. He rolled his eyes as he grabbed it, looking for Anne's number as he quickly turned the volume down. He checked Peter in the rearview mirror. He was still sleeping. The caller ID number was unrecognizable. I don't know who this is, but I don't even care. It must be good news. Hello? Yeah, Thomas? The caller said. Yes, this is Thomas. Hey, this is Father Raymond. Please don't be calling about medical advice. Hi, how are you, Father? I'm good. I was headed outside to plant my trees, and I noticed there were a little Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn camping out in my hills. Thomas felt a huge surge of emotion flood his chest. We've been looking for them. Tell me where they are, and I'll be there. They're up on the hill behind the church, but it's sort of hard to find them. Do you want to meet me up there? Yeah, that would be great. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Thomas hung up the phone. He pushed his foot down hard on the gas pedal, accelerating the van to over 50 miles an hour in residential areas. Driving with his knees, he texted Anne. Father Raymond called. He found the boys. I'm going to get them. Be there soon. Love you. Barely 3 seconds later, he got a text back that said, Thank God and hurry. Thomas guided the van up the dirt path leading up the hill behind the church. The road stopped at the little cabin on the hill, and he pulled his van into the clearing. He spotted Father coming down the hill from a clearing in the trees. Thomas jumped out of his van to greet him. Father Raymond wore camouflage and carried a flashlight. It's a little weird that Father's running out around the hills by himself in the middle of the night. He said he was planting trees. It's December. You can't plant trees in December. I guess, whatever. I'm just grateful he found my boys. He was about to run over to meet Father when he remembered Peter was asleep in the back seat. Thomas looked into the window to check on Peter. His head had fallen all the way over to the other side. A moist trail of drool glistened down his chin to confirm he was fully passed out. If I wake him up, he'll be a bear, and it would be terrible to get him to calm down. It's freezing out, and I don't need him with his weak immune system traipsing all over the hills. He motioned for Father to come all the way to the van. Father hustled over. Peter's sleeping in the van. Anne's with Marie at the hospital. She's in labor. I didn't have anywhere to take him, and I don't want to wake him. He was way overtired. Do you want to stay here by the van, and I can go? You might not see them. They're hiding pretty well. The only reason I found them is I'm up here all the time, and I saw a few footsteps, so I followed them. It only takes about 10 minutes if we hurry. Maybe just lock the doors, and I'll run back. Thomas was concerned about leaving Peter in the van, but he didn't really see another option. He's sleeping. It'll be fast, and then Father will be back. Okay, let's run. Thomas nodded his head, and they were off. Father Raymond was a younger priest in his 30s, so he could run at a good pace. They sprinted up the hill and around a bend in the trees. Father pointed to some little footprints which were barely visible. The ground had been slightly moist from melted snow in a couple low areas, and mud captured the footprints when it refroze. They followed the prints through another clearing, which left the main path. Slowing down, Father said in a whisper, "I don't want to run up on them because they'll hear us and they might run off scared." Thomas could then see the soft glow of light, and as they took another couple of steps forward, he saw some shadows. Never in a million years would I approach those shadows if I didn't know it was Paul and Tane. They walked around another evergreen tree, and Thomas could see their faces. The boys must have heard steps, and both looked up at the same time. They had the exact same expression on their faces, a wide-open mouth and frozen eye contact with Thomas. "Dad!" Tane called. "Dad, you scared the crud out of me!" Paul screamed as he had jumped to his feet and grabbed a stick, ready to pounce on a predator. "What are you doing here?" "I came to take you home. Father said you were out here and called me. Thank God! Are you trying to get killed? Who knows what's hiding out here?" Thomas wanted to say so much more, but he just didn't have time for it. "We're camping out here. We're not going home," Tane said as he shined a flashlight directly at Thomas, blinding him. Thomas stepped out of the light. "Yeah, you are. You need to get up and out of here fast because your mom's in labor, about to have the baby. I need to get to her. I don't have time for games. Peter's sleeping in the car." His voice trailed off. "Peter," he repeated as he looked at Father. He had forgotten already. Father nodded. "I'll go back if you can find your way." "We will," Thomas said, and Father ran back down the path. Thomas looked around and saw the boys had flashlights, sleeping bags, and what looked like a bag of food. "Where did you get all this stuff?" "We grabbed it out of the garage from the camping stuff before we left," Tane said. He had a proud smirk on his face, like he thought it was funny. "Pick it up. We don't have any time to spare. Let's go," Thomas urged as he grabbed a sleeping bag, rolled it up, and threw it under his arm. He motioned for the boys to gather their stuff. He needed them to move. "Hurry!" Paul and Tane were completely obedient. They collected their supplies, while Thomas tried to recover the last of his patience. Paul and Tane are good boys, but they could have picked a better day to pull this stunt. Any other day, this might have been funny, but not now. Thomas had one thing on his mind: Anne. He was sweating cannonballs by the time he got to the hospital. He ordered the boys out of the van. It was a good thing Thomas was a doctor at the hospital because he didn't stop at the front for registration or any kind of permission. He knew where the delivery room was located, and he plowed over everything in his path to get to Anne. The hospital staff moved to clear a path for him as he blazed through. The boys tried their best to keep up, but all three were way overtired and in terrible moods, so they trailed behind. As they approached the delivery room, they saw Marie sitting outside of it with her back against the wall. She wore her music headphones to block out the screaming. When she saw her family coming, she took out her earbuds. "Dad, hurry! The baby's here! Mom made me come out here because the baby's here!" She stood and jumped up and down as she motioned for them to hurry. Thomas sprinted the last few steps as he called to the boys to stay in the hall with Marie. He blasted through the doors. All Thomas saw, once inside the room, was Anne's doctor reaching down to pull the baby out of Anne. It was a him. Thomas burst into tears as he ran to Anne's bedside. Anne reached for her new son and placed him on her chest. Relief finally grazed over Anne's face. In a calm voice, Thomas said, "The boys are here, all 4 of them." Anne looked down at the little miracle in her hands, smiling through her tears. "All my boys are here now." They embraced as a new family for the first time. "All moments in life are precious, but beginnings are the sweetest ones," Anne said as she kissed the top of Shiloh's peach-fuzzed head. Chapter 7. Peter. All moments in life are precious, But beginnings are the sweetest ones, Thomas whispered to Peter. He was still medically sedated, but he looked like a sleeping child. Do you know that's what your mom said to each one of you kids when you were born? Thomas waited for a sign that Peter heard him. There was no sign. Thomas continued. I was thinking about that night you and I drove all over looking for Paul and Tane. We made a pretty good team that night, didn't we? Thomas squeezed Peter's hand. Do you remember that night? It was the night Shiloh was born. I'll never forget that night as long as I live. He sighed heavily, still unable to tell if Peter could hear him. Peter heard him all right. I know the night you're talking about. I'll never forget it. I still have nightmares about it. Peter remembered how he had woken up to find himself in the van, sitting in his car seat alone. It's cold in here. He opened his eyes. It's dark in here, and Dad's gone. Frightened, he unsnapped his seatbelt to climb down from the seat and slid through the center aisle of the van into the driver's seat. He looked out of the windshield, where he had a front row seat to where they were parked. The goat woman's house. Immediately, he collapsed onto the floor to hide under the dash. He was instantly dizzy, and his chest was tight. After pausing a moment, he rose slowly to peek over the dash again. There it is, and nobody's here. The house looked worse close up. Paint was chipped off the wood siding, giving the cabin an abandoned farmhouse look. The roof hung low to cover the front porch, creating shadows that added to the creepiness. An almost transparent white linen curtain hung over a window above the deck where a single yellow glow illuminated the interior of the house. Peter gulped out loud. The goat woman has Dad. He's in there. She has him. Visions of his dad being tied up and tortured flashed through his mind. Oh no, what am I going to do? I need to call Mom. Peter looked around. The cell phone was gone. It must be with Dad. His heart jumped around in his chest so fast he became dizzy again. Then he had another thought, and it almost crippled him. I'm stuck in here. Dad's gone, and I'm here. I have to get out. There are no keys. Not that I know how to drive a van, but how hard could it be, really? He looked out the back window and saw the long dirt road with the hill. I'm going to have to run down that hill. He looked at his leg braces, stabilizing his ankles. My legs don't work well for running, but I have to try. He pulled the door handle while he kept one eye fixed on the cabin. He was thinking and reacting fast. I can't stay here another minute or I might be found. I'm going to jump out, run to the church, and go find Father Raymond to call Mom. Peter's breath was shallow and rapid. He watched the house while he tried to catch his breath. Then he had another thought. I can't leave Dad in there. His eyes went back to the window with the light. Maybe I can peek in there to see him? He swallowed hard. There was a lump in his throat he had never felt before. He loved his dad, and his mom was going to have a baby tonight, and she needed his dad. He swallowed again. The lump was blocking his airway. From somewhere deep inside of him that he never knew was there, he felt a strange calmness come over him. He knew what he had to do, so much so that he even said out loud, A man has to do what a man has to do. He took another deep breath and jumped out of the van. Landing on the tips of his toes, he inched forward, careful not to make a sound. He had seen a show on TV where detectives walked around like this when they didn't want to be seen. I'm going to peep in the window for a second. If I don't see anything, I'll race down the hill." He didn't know what he was going to do if he saw his dad. His mind wasn't thinking that far ahead yet. Very slowly, one toe at a time, he crept towards the house. Peter held his chest with one hand in an effort to control his heartbeat. He thought it was ready to launch out of his chest. He visualized his heart flying out of his chest so far it knocked out the goat woman, allowing him time to free his dad. He sneaked up to the bottom step of the deck and perched to let his eyes scope the place out. There was still no sign of anyone. "Up the steps, over to the window, look in, turn, and run," he planned. Repeating his plan quietly in his head about 10 times, Peter tried to get the courage to actually do it. "Another deep breath, and here I go. Deep breath in, deep breath out." And he was off, up one step, then the next, looking both ways for clearance, and there was nothing. Peter glanced forward, and there was nothing. He leaped towards the window. He landed on his feet with his knees bent, and his face was pointed down like a frog landing on a lily pad. "Oh, man, I'm on the deck of the goat woman's house. Wait until Tane and Paul hear this. Oh, wait, they're missing? Oh, no. I know why Dad drove here. The goat woman had Paul and Tane, and Dad came here to get them, but he was captured too. They're all in there." Nervous sweat poured down Peter's back despite the fact that it was freezing outside. "The nasty goat woman has my whole family. I must save them." Frantic now, he knew what he had to do. Ever so slowly, he peered into the window. The curtain made visibility difficult, but it was sheer enough he could see through it when he pressed his face all the way against the window. The room was lit from a roaring fire in the stone fireplace on the wall. He saw a kitchen table with some chairs. 3 wooden shoe, box-sized chests were laid out on the counter. He ducked down to catch his breath. He was relieved he didn't see anything too scary, but he wasn't done. He needed another glimpse. Timidly, he raised himself back up so he could see again. There she was. The goat woman was standing at the stove with her back towards the window. Her long, gray robe hung to the floor, concealing her goat hooves. That's her, all right. Something was now on the table. She has red garbage bags and something else. Cloth or paper. I need to get closer. He inched up on his toes. His legs wobbled as they supported his weight. It has to be cloth because paper wouldn't lay like that. Bed sheets with red stains. Blood. Oh, no! Peter gasped. She has bloody sheets. She killed my dad and wrapped him in a sheet. The goat woman walked over to the pile of bed sheets. She lifted one corner of the pile and laid her hands down on something. She picked up the object by holding the sheet, with it still lying in the center. As she raised it off the table, she turned towards the side counter by the boxes. Peter had a direct view of the object. She lowered it into the box. It's a bloody blob. I don't know what, but she killed something. Peter's stomach churned loudly. He fell to his knees. He couldn't stand any more. His imagination was wild. Were Paul or Tane in the sheets too? No, the pile wasn't big enough for bodies. He was panting. One more look. I have to know if my family's still alive. He stood tall as he could on his toes. He strained his eyes. He dug deep for courage as he tried to stretch his neck like a crane just a little higher. And then it happened. Directly in front of him on the other side of the window pane, he saw a pair of glowing green eyes. They were looking directly into his. It was the goat woman. She saw him. She was making eye contact with him. Those are greenest eyes I've ever seen. And they had a deafening glow to them. Peter froze for a life-flashing moment before he felt a warm liquid oozing down his leg. He was peeing his pants. "Ah!" he shrieked. Adrenaline surged through his body as he jolted out of his frozen state of fear and sprang off the deck. Dad, Tane, and Paul were goners, but I'm not going to join them. Peter's leg braces clicked as he ran hard and fast. Where am I going to go? The van's a dead end because there's no keys. Up in the hills or down to the church. The goat woman's probably fast on my tail. He couldn't decide. He was running out towards the road, but didn't know if he was going to go up or down, when all of a sudden, wham! He ran smack into someone. The goat woman. She's in front of me. She flies. She must have flown out in front of me. I ran into the goat woman and she's huge. She had to be over 6 feet tall and solid. She grabbed him, pulling him into a chest hold. She pinned him to her grasp. He wiggled. He screamed. He cried. He couldn't get out. I don't want to die, he cried out. Peter, Peter, calm down, she called. She had a deep masculine voice. God, if I have to die, don't let it take long. I don't want to see her goat face or those eyes. He stopped fighting, closed his eyes, covered his head, and tried to crouch down, but couldn't free her grasp. He was ready to die. Hurry up and do it! Peter, it's Father Raymond. Calm down, the voice said. The embrace on Peter became softer and less constricting. Peter's heart surged. It's Father Raymond. He opened his eyes, and Father was there. He was alone. What's he doing out here? The goat woman would get both of us. Father, we have to run. We have to run back to the church. The goat woman has my dad and brothers, and she's after me. Peter spilled out as he grabbed Father's hand, yanking him down the hill. Peter, your dad and brothers are fine. They're just up the hill and will be here in a few seconds. Calm down. Father could see that Peter was sickened by something. His pupils were dilated. He had worked up a sweat and was white as a ghost. No, Father, I saw her. I saw the goat woman. He pointed towards the cabin with a trembling hand. We have to run. She's coming after me. I saw her and her blood. She has bloody stuff, Peter cried, tugging at Father's arm. Peter, can you see your dad over there? There's your brothers. Father pointed to the top of the hill where the boys' flashlights could be seen. Peter saw the lights and got quiet. He looked back to the house. He saw no one coming after him. It looks like my dad will be here in a little bit. He has keys and can drive the van away. That's the fastest way to get out of here, but I don't want to wait outside. I'm waiting in the van, he told Father. Peter climbed back into the van, locking the door behind him. He bounced his gaze between the cabin door and the light beams descending on the hill towards him. He tapped his foot in the air to help calm his anxiety. All he wanted to do was get away from her. A couple minutes later, his dad was outside the van. Peter could see his brothers were with him. They were in a hurry. His dad waved goodbye to Father and ran towards the van, yelling at the boys to climb in. Thomas yelled at Peter to get in his car seat. Peter obeyed because he wanted to get going too. Once the van was moving, Peter looked back at the house. It was soundless. No sight of the goat woman. He didn't believe what he saw, and he knew no one else would either. He decided the only person he would tell would be his mom. The house shrank in the window as they drove away until it was invisible. With the house out of his view, Peter calmed down and realized he was soaked from urine and sweat, and he was freezing. No one noticed he was trembling, which made him miss his mom because she would have noticed. He tried to clench his teeth to stop his jaw from quivering. He fought tears to no avail. Hot tears welled in his eyes and melted the iciness on his cheek as they fell. His dad raced down the streets toward the hospital, and his brothers were silent. Peter sat in the back seat, sobbing uncontrollably, and nobody noticed. Chapter 8. Anne. "What are you thinking about?" Anne asked Thomas as she returned to Peter's bedside from her shower in the hospital bathroom. She had dressed in the clothes Shiloh had packed for her, black yoga pants and an oversized hooded sweatshirt that said, "World's Okayest Mom." It had been a present from Tane a few years back. Her normally perky blonde curls were wrapped into a bun on top of her head. She felt like a wet noodle as she sat in the corner chair across from Peter's hospital bed. She slouched way down into the chair and pulled up a blanket. "I was thinking about what you said when Shiloh was born. It seems so long ago when he was little and the other kids were all at home, too. Time goes by so fast. One minute, they all want you to hold them, and you can't put them down for a second or they'll get mad. Then the next minute, they don't return your phone calls. Yeah, I remember when Shiloh was little. That was a rough time for me." Anne shared her memory of his first day home from the hospital. "I remember trying to adjust to a baby with Peter's school issues going on. It was really hard." Anne reminisced about the first day she and her beautiful, new baby Shiloh were back at home. Anne was trying to get back into the swing of managing the household, plus nursing a new baby while healing up from childbirth. Thomas had agreed to drive the kids to school for a few weeks, so Anne didn't have to take Shiloh out in the cold December air. To say Anne was overwhelmed was an understatement. It was as if all the closets and dressers decided to vomit out their contents at the same time, leaving laundry littered in every possible space imaginable. When she arrived home, her heart sank as her feet crunched the overlooked glass that was still on the walkway outside the window that Paul and Tane had broken. The boys had not been punished yet, and Anne still had to talk to Peter about his school stuff. They also had the Christmas concert at the school early next week. Plus, Anne was planning Shiloh's baptism with the whole extended family for the following weekend. Anne's head was spinning. I wish I could have a maid. Anne and Shiloh were enjoying a few quiet hours before the kids got back from school. Anne watched Shiloh as he dozed off to sleep. He's so beautiful. He looks so much like Paul and Tane. What a gift he is to our family. Anne laid him in the crib, turned the monitor on, and decided to tackle the laundry. As she headed down the hall to the bathroom, she heard the phone ringing. Don't wake up Shiloh. She hustled to the phone. Caller ID showed it was the school. Anne's heart plummeted. Hello, Anne spoke softly, trying not to wake Shiloh. Anne, it's Val. How are you? Hi, Val. I'm all right. How's that baby? Ready to make an entrance? Oh, he's here. He came on Friday. Anne sounded exhausted. Oh, my, I didn't know. I'm sorry to bug you then. I had no idea. He must have been a little early? Yeah, a few weeks. We're okay, though. What can I help you with, Val? Anne was scared to ask, and she felt like she already knew the answer. I can call Thomas. No, just tell me, and I can get a hold of Thomas if I need to. Well, Peter's having a rough day. What's going on? He's been crying all morning. Mrs. Krieg had him in her office for a while, but she had to leave town. He was upset when he got here this morning. It escalated when he didn't have a bag lunch and tuna was on the menu. He was having raging fits in the classroom. He threw things out of his desk and then he knocked his classmate's desk over onto the ground, with her still sitting there. It's tuna day again? How often do you serve that? Anne immediately felt guilty. I didn't know it was tuna day. I didn't check the lunch menu because I was in the hospital. What do you want us to do? He can't be disrupting class. Do you want to come get him or what? Val continued. Anne rubbed her forehead temples. I just need a break from this school drama for one day. I'll call Thomas to come get him. She hung up the phone and dialed Thomas's cell phone. Thomas, the school called. Peter needs to be picked up. What happened? He's upset, disrupting the class because he didn't get a bag lunch, and it's tuna day. Can you go get him? Anne checked the baby monitor. Shiloh was perfect, complete with a little baby smile. Yep, anything else you need? No. Anne hung up the phone again and mournfully went to fold her piles of laundry. Anne giggled at the memory of it. I'll never forget those piles of laundry. Every color, size, and shape was represented like a melting pot. I seriously think if there were a world record for that sort of thing, I should have entered the contest. Thomas laughed. He remembered getting Peter from school that day. Those years were tough, but I would go back to them in a New York minute. Do you remember where I found Peter when I got to the school? I don't know if I do. Those years are just a haze to me. Was he with Val? Anne asked. Thomas laughed again with a smile on his face as he retold his experience that day. Thomas. After Thomas had arrived at school, there was no sign of Peter. Val came out of her office and said, He went into Mrs. Polly's room. She pointed to a room across the hall. Thomas shrugged his shoulders in confusion. I thought he had music at 11. We don't have the staff to deal with this stuff anymore. He couldn't stay in his classroom. Mrs. Krieg's gone, and I've been trying to help sub the gym class today. He wanted to go in there, and Mrs. Polly didn't mind. I didn't have anywhere else to put him, Val said in a defensive tone. Thomas walked across the hall and was going to enter the room when he heard music and kids singing. He looked through the window on the door, and he saw older kids. Tane was sitting on a chair in the back row. Tane saw his dad, and he waved back. And then he saw Peter sitting on the piano bench next to the teacher. Thomas waited for the end of class, which took about 15 minutes. The kids walked out of the door in a single file. Tane was one of the last students out the door. He saw his dad and called out, Dad, are you here to get Peter? Yeah. Why is he in there? He just likes it in there. He's really good at playing the piano. Okay, but I'll see you after school when I pick you up. Thomas waved to Tane, who walked in line with his class, which was leaving. Thomas walked into the now nearly vacant room. Peter was still sitting at the piano, but he looked happy. Mrs. Polly walked around, placing music sheets on the chairs to get ready for the next class. Looking up, she noticed Thomas, but it took her a minute before she recognized him as Peter's dad. Mr. Arnold! Dad! Peter called as he jumped down from the piano and ran over to him. Hi, how are you guys? Thomas asked Peter, but he looked to Mrs. Polly for an answer. We're great. Peter's the best helper. Mrs. Polly winked at Thomas. She had a smile on her face that matched the cheery colors of her sweater. I forgot something in the copy machine. I'll be right back. She stuck a pencil behind her ear, which was barely visible in her red mop of hair, and she left the room. Peter, why are you not in your classroom? Thomas asked. Dad, I can't be there. They had tuna again. I didn't have a lunch. My teacher told me I had to eat the tuna, but I couldn't. The kids were all making fun of me, but I was good. I waited until the lunch bell rang, so they had to let me go back to class. But once I got back to my desk, I could smell the tuna on Aiden, who sits next to me. It was so bad. The teacher wouldn't let me move, so I had to do something to get out. Thomas didn't have the patience for Peter's whining. So you got into trouble on purpose so you could get out of the class. How did you end up in music class?
I just came in here because Val said she didn't want me in her office. I didn't have anywhere to go. Mrs. Polly's my friend.
Son, that is not appropriate. We need to go so Mrs. Polly can work. You can't be bothering other teachers. You need to learn to stay in your classroom. Thomas grabbed Peter by the hand, leading him out the door. He waved at Mrs. Polly, who was down the hall, and called, "Thank you." "No problem," Mrs. Polly said. Thomas was in a hurry to get out of the building. It's so embarrassing always having to come here and take care of these little episodes with Peter. Things have to get better soon. Val met them by the front door as they were trying to make an escape. "I grabbed his homework from his teacher." She handed Thomas a stack of books and a folder. "Mrs. Krieg isn't here right now, but she's going to want to talk to you again. She needs you to follow through with the behavior evaluation," Val pressed. "Thanks for the help, but I gotta go." Thomas pushed through the door, holding Peter's hand without looking back.